Like everyone else on this planet, I'm super excited for the sequel to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. And after that newest trailer, I've got a few different thoughts about the game. With the first two trailers, they didn't really amaze me or show me anything too different, and they're quite short in their own right, to be honest, as one of the trailers was the first look that we saw in 2019, and then we had that 1-minute teaser that didn't really show too much of what we were actually going to be seeing, except some of those Sky Islands that Link has a new hand and some of the new abilities. However, this newest trailer that just came out a couple days ago with the new Nintendo Direct really has shown us what this game is all going to be about and whether it really does differentiate itself enough from Breath of the Wild. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns surrounding this game. Many people are excited for it, me included, and I absolutely loved Breath of the Wild, but I want to see if Nintendo can differentiate the game enough for it to even exist. For example, Breath of the Wild could have just been a one and done sort of thing like Twilight Princess, such as Skyward Sword, such as Wind Waker. All these games are amazing Zelda games and are hailed as some of the best Zelda games ever made, and they were all separate from one another with an entirely unique link, a unique story, unique plot lines, unique setting. But Breath of the Wild has the privilege, such as Ocarina of Time, to have a sequel, and we can definitely see that this game, Tears of the Kingdom, is definitely the Majora's Mask to Ocarina of Time in both the setting, the environment, and even the atmosphere of the game. Definitely feels like Majora's Mask in many ways. And when you're writing off one of the most critically and commercially successful video games of all time, and a system seller in its own right, and a game that many people can say actually saved Nintendo from what it's been going through since the Wii U, Breath of the Wild really cemented itself in gaming. It's one of the most revolutionary open world games ever, and I think it's inspired every single open world game that has come out since its inception. And we can see this with games like Elden Ring or Immortals Phoenix Rising is a bit more of an obvious one, but there's so many examples of the game itself through its design philosophy inspiring so many more games out there. And I think it will continue to innovate and show people that games can continuously evolve, even a game genre such as the open world genre, which is one that came quite stagnant until the release of Breath of the Wild. So Tears of the Kingdom has a lot to live up to, and in many ways there's a lot of similarities between that game and other huge video game sequels such as The Last of Us 2. They all had something huge to live up to. Breath of the Wild won Game of the Year, winning hundreds of Game of the Year awards, and everyone hailed it as the best game of 2017 and actually one of the best games of that entire generation. So Tears of the Kingdom definitely has a lot to show us, and so far the game has been doing alright in the trailers and whatnot. For me, the biggest concern with Breath of the Wild was not within its gameplay, its open world design, or even the characters and the towns you went through. All of that felt quite lively and felt quite amazing in the atmosphere that the game developers created. However, the most missing factor from that, which is a missing factor from all the other Zelda games, is the story. Every other Zelda game has an absolutely fantastic story, or from what I've played at least. Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask all have incredible stories to tell, and even though Link is a silent protagonist, there's so much more that we can still tell with the character. There's so much with this Link. We don't know much about the Breath of the Wild Link. We only see some of his personality through flashbacks and whatnot, but we don't really get to see him develop, and Breath of the Wild didn't really have a proper story to bring you in, to connect you to these characters, to connect you to the world. And that's one thing I really missed from this game than I did from all the other Zelda games out there. All the other Zelda games have a cohesive story. Twilight Princess has an amazing story, one that is so drenched in all of its emotions and the characters that you really get a feel of the atmosphere and the world. And Breath of the Wild didn't really have that. You truly get immersed in the world through the gameplay component of the game, rather than getting immersed into the story, which therefore commits you into that world. I wasn't really committed to the quest of defeating Ganon in a story point of view. Instead, I was looking at it at a gameplay perspective, and in the gameplay, he was the final boss, the final objective, the final marker on your map that you had to go to in order to finish the game, to see the credits roll. So that's the only reason I got too motivated to actually finish the story. If there wasn't that indicator telling you to finish the story, then I don't think a lot of people might have even finished it, because the story in itself wasn't that engaging. The flashbacks were the main source of telling a story and connecting you to these characters and the writing in the game, but these flashbacks had to be acquired through the gameplay itself. And when you're just messing around with all the different mechanics, that's what the game is for you. And I think for me, the biggest memories I have with Breath of the Wild are not with the story components, the strong character writing, or anything else that's amazing within that world. Rather, it's the open world design, exploring, seeing all these different environments, the combat, the crazy and wacky things you can do with your environment, all the tools that you have at your disposal. And that's what truly made Breath of the Wild an absolutely fantastic game in all right, but except the story component of the game. And it was surely lacking there. And I think many other people in the Zelda community have definitely commented on that, because it's surely the weakest game in the entire series in terms of its story. And I think the developers weren't really paying attention to the story, because when you're trying to innovate an entire formula into a completely new formula that the series has never even heard of, and there's a lot you've got to change change, and so some things are going to lack, and the story was one of those components. Everything else, the gameplay, the open world, the design and everything, the shrines, a lot of them were actually super fun to do, but the story in itself was not that enjoyable, and it was just the objectives that you had to do that made you want to do it in the first place. So from what we've seen of Tears of the Kingdom, the game definitely looks like it's going to have an emphasis on the story component. Everything we've seen so far is showing Zelda and Link and Ganon, and we're actually getting to see the world, and we even saw voice acting of what seems to be Ganon. However, I'm not entirely sure, and I haven't actually watched any of those big analysis videos that YouTubers like Zeltic do, and so I don't really know what that is, but pretty sure it was Ganon's voice, and that makes me super excited about this game. But also from the gameplay segments of what we've seen throughout this trailer and the other trailers that we've seen of Tears of the Kingdom, they haven't been showing us too much of what the world looks like, and the world kind of looks the same. Even the towns look the same in the new trailer that we've seen of Tears of the Kingdom. That actually does make me a little worried about the game, but maybe Nintendo is hiding some of that bigger stuff to show in a different proper showcase like they did before Breath of the Wild release, like that big huge 1 hour showcase, and maybe they're going to do that again for Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm really keeping my fingers crossed to see that in a couple of months or so, because the game's not that far from release, about 3 months away, and that's really exciting. However, I do want to see a bit more of the gameplay sections of the game, and from what we've seen of the second trailer, there seems to be some different mechanics such as building your own vehicles, which looks absolutely awesome and something I'm really excited about. And it looks like Nintendo saw everything, all the wacky things we players were doing, and then brought that in as a gameplay mechanic, and that's awesome to see. And I hope Nintendo does that with other franchises as well. But seeing all these different mechanics integrated into Tears of the Kingdom makes me super excited about this game, and the potential of this game is absolutely gigantic. It can be even better than Breath of the Wild, and it can be a genre-defining game in its own right. But for me, what I want to see is a greater emphasis on the story of what we've definitely seen in the trailers so far, and I hope that story is absolutely fantastic, that it can rival even the best of the Zelda stories and make you truly connected to the characters, the world, and everything that's going on within it as well. And I really hope this game does touch on some of the issues with the gameplay of Breath of the Wild and addresses some of the open world design flaws that was in Breath of the Wild as well. And I hope this is a true reinforcement of how great Breath of the Wild is into a new generation of gaming, and I really hope that Tears of the Kingdom is even better than Breath of the Wild and one of the best Zelda games ever made, and the potential of the game to be exactly that is all there for Nintendo, and I really hope they take advantage of that to make this one of the greatest games of this generation.